Chapter 26. Xiao Ran's malicious taste. Yoko Okino panics. Uncle Sakamoto, still the same as always. Yoko Okino said that after she sat down. The regulars in the izakaya kept chatting among themselves and didn't stare. They'd seen her enough times that her presence no longer caused a scene. Miss Yoko, I didn't expect to see you again so soon, Xiao Ran said, looking over at the woman who happened to be sitting in the next seat. Huh. You're the detective's daughter's classmate, Yoko replied in surprise. She hadn't expected to run into him here. She'd been coming to this place since she first entered show business, and even after she became famous, she still dropped in sometimes. As a national idol, she'd eaten at countless high-end restaurants, but this little izakaya meant nostalgia more than gourmet food. Most of the customers were regulars and well acquainted with her. They weren't the sort to harass a celebrity. After years of working and getting burned by the world, their youthful impulse had faded. A few curious glances at most, until the novelty wore off completely. Did you just come from the police station? Xiao Ran asked. Yoko nodded. Yes, I just gave a statement. I haven't eaten dinner yet, so I thought I'd come here. Off camera and off stage, Yoko Okino wasn't always glossy and bright. Now she looked tired, mentally drained from the Fuji Akiyoshi affair. Is the case closed? Xiao Ran asked. Yes, it's closed. It's finally over, she said with a sigh of relief. The suspicion of murder was off her, and she looked freed from the ordeal, though Xiao Ran suspected she was equally glad to have that difficult man, Fuji Akiyoshi, out of her life. Congratulations, Miss Yoko. You won't have to worry about him anymore. Xiao Ran smiled. What do you mean? She asked, guilt flickering across her face. Xiao Ran leaned in and lowered his voice. Didn't Fuji keep pestering you and asking you for money? Now he's dead, and you've been cleared, kind of like killing two birds with one stone. Yoko's face went pale. She hadn't expected him to know she'd given Fuji money. You, she began. Shh, don't make a scene. Don't worry, I won't spread it around. I'm not Fuji Akiyoshi, he said lightly, then sat back up as if nothing had happened. The other customers continued their conversations and paid them no heed. Yoko sat frozen, panic and calculation churning in her head. She hadn't expected anyone her age, or younger, to pry into her secrets. Was Xiao Ran going to become another extortionist? She wasn't a naive girl anymore. She knew how merciless the entertainment industry and management companies could be. Her old contract had been like a vampire, siphoning away her earnings. For a 5 million yen commercial, she might not even see 1 million. Over the years, what she'd earned had gone to buy a house and 2 cars, to finance her image, or to quiet Fuji Akiyoshi. There weren't tens of millions in the bank, maybe not even 50 million. Just as she'd started to breathe easier with Fuji gone, now she had to worry about someone else. Xiao Ran's offhand assurance that he wouldn't be like Fuji didn't comfort her. She knew better than to trust platitudes. The thought of another man leaning on her for money made her fidget. Xiao Ran, however, had no intention of blackmail. He hadn't even been thinking about money. As a self-styled Superman, did he need to extort people? The technological knowledge from Krypton in his head could, in theory, make him rich many times over. He had only hinted at her secret because he liked seeing her startled expression. He found it amusing. That was all. The food arrived for Yoko, but she only took a few bites before losing her appetite. Instead, she finished an entire pot of sake in 2 or 3 gulps. Her cheeks flushed, and a light drunkenness came on quickly. Uncle Sakamoto, another pot of sake, she ordered. Sakamoto, who brought the drink, gave her a curious look. Miss Yoko, something troubling you? It's work-related, she said vaguely. She finished the second pot quickly as well. Ordinarily, she could handle 3 or 4 pots without feeling it, but tonight she'd been drinking too fast. 2 was enough to make her a little tipsy. Chapter 27. Yoko Okino's request. Taking an idol home. Boss, check please, Xiao Ran called. He'd finished his meal and glanced at his watch. 9 o'clock. Time to go home and keep his regular schedule. Sleep before 10, up at 6. He wanted to finish the Man of Steel, world content he was working through before moving on to the next American comic universe. That'll be 3,500 yen, Sakamoto said, listing what Xiao Ran had ordered. The price seemed fair. The food had been better than average. Xiao Ran paid and stood. The izakaya was a little out of the way from his place, but but he planned to buy a motorcycle soon and the distance wouldn't matter then. He liked the atmosphere here. Listening to the uncle's gripe and brag about life was entertaining. Just as he stepped outside, the izakaya door opened again and Yoko hurried after him. "Sir, please wait," Xiao Ran stopped. "Yes?" She caught her breath and then looked up at him. "Can I ask a favor?" "Sure," he said, curious. She wasn't someone he was close to, and the request had come out of nowhere. "Someone died at my house," she said awkwardly. "I'm scared to go back there right now, and I'm afraid to stay in a hotel alone." Xiao Ran nodded. "So, you want to stay at my place for a few days?" Her eyes were hopeful and pleading. She clasped her hands together. For a moment he wondered if she'd lost her senses. Running to a stranger, let alone a boy, and asking to stay over. But curiosity and the chance to see what would happen nudged him. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Please, help me," she begged, grabbing his arm in a small, almost desperate gesture. He thought for a beat and then agreed. "All right, come with me." "Thank you," she said, relief washing over her. She fumbled in her bag and produced a car key. "I drove here, but I've been drinking. I can't drive now. Sir, could you drive?" Chapter 22, Section 22, Give It to Me. Xiao Ran took the car keys from her hand. Yoko Okino's white Mercedes sports car was parked in a roadside space directly across from the izakaya. He climbed in, got used to the right-hand drive, and started the engine. "Let's go." Yoko, sitting in the passenger seat, punched the air with both fists and shouted. Xiao Ran gave a flat look. "Fasten your seatbelt," he reminded her, then drove slowly toward the intersection. About 10 minutes later, they arrived at his house. He pulled the car into the garage that had sat empty for 2 years. Yoko peered around at the unfamiliar surroundings with obvious curiosity. "Come in. I'll get you some slippers," Xiao Ran said as he opened the door. "Your house is so big," Yoko exclaimed. "I'm alone here," he replied. "If you're having second thoughts, it's not too late to go." She pretended not to hear that and accepted the new slippers he handed her. After slipping them on, she ran into the living room on the first floor. "Wow, this living room is huge," she spun once, then flopped onto the sofa. "This sofa is nice too." Xiao Ran watched her act deliberately innocent and decided not to be bothered. Once someone has made up their mind, there's no point in pretending. "Want anything to drink?" he asked. "No, I'm tired. Where will I sleep tonight?" She stood and stretched. "Come with me. I'll show you the room." He led her upstairs to the second floor, opened a door, and flipped on the light. "This used to be my parents' room. The bedding and everything are in the closet. Check it for yourself." He pointed to the closet. "There's a bathroom across the hall and another one downstairs." "Where's your room?" she asked suddenly. He pointed next door. "Over there." "Well then, good night," she offered, a little unsure. "Good night," she echoed with a nod. Xiao Ran left her to it. Because he'd been somewhere earlier that day, a place where someone had died, Xiao Ran took a shower despite not being physically dirty. His bioforce field had protected him, but the uneasy feeling lingered. A shower would at least settle him. In pajamas and clean, he returned to his room and flipped on the light. A small head peeked up from under the covers, and a pair of big eyes blinked at him. "Aren't you coming over?" Yoko asked, her cheeks flushed. Xiao Ran closed the door quietly and walked to the bed. He pulled back the blanket and slid in beside her. He turned to look at her. "What are you playing at, Miss Yoko?" Clutching the blanket like a shield, she answered in a tremulous voice. "I just saw a dead person today. When I came back to my room, I was too scared to stay there by myself. Please, let me sleep here tonight." He thought of Fuji Akiyoshi, the dead man they'd seen earlier. If Fuji knew she kept using his death as an excuse, would he be angry enough to come back? Of course not. He was already gone. Maybe he'd be cremated tomorrow. "Fine. Who asked me to be kind-hearted?" Xiao Ran muttered, half amused. Her eyes twitched, ready with a retort, but she fell silent. He switched off the main light, leaving only a table lamp with a dim, warm glow. Xiao Ran lay back and had just closed his eyes when Yoko squirmed closer. They turned and faced each other. "You're so brave." She tried to sound indignant, but it came out weak. He cut her off. He was young and his patience had limits. The moon outside ducked behind a cloud as if shy. A short while later, things progressed naturally. More than 2 hours later, Yoko pleaded for mercy. She genuinely couldn't solve the fourth problem he'd set her. The first three, 1 0, 1 plus 0, and out, had used up whatever math knowledge she had in her life. Now the fourth question baffled her. "Woo, please let me go," she begged. Xiao Ran studied her pitiful face. He'd intended to tutor her through 4 problems that night, but she had truly done her best. If she couldn't manage the fourth, he'd call it quits. "Okay, try to finish 4 tomorrow, understood?" he said, twirling a stray lock of her hair around his finger. "I'll try," she replied, lacking confidence. He glanced at her with a teasing look, thinking she was a novice who needed more practice. "All right, sleep." He pulled her into an embrace. Yoko, worn out from trying to answer the 3 problems, soon closed her eyes and fell asleep. Xiao Ran lay watching her for a while, smiling to himself. What a strange day. If Muri Kogoro knew, he'd be so jealous, he thought with an inward chuckle, and closed his eyes. When he opened them again, he was in a hotel room in Smallville. The clock read 6 a.m. The other guests were still asleep. The hotel was quiet. He lay in bed a moment, then got up to brush his teeth and wash his face. By 6:15, he was dressed, had packed his luggage, checked out, and eaten breakfast. He returned the rental car, recovered part of the deposit, and left the small town. He'd said goodbye to Clark the day before, so there was no need for farewells now. In no time at all, he had returned to his home in Metropolis. Flying himself was far quicker than taking a plane. He dropped his luggage, threw his dirty clothes into the washing machine, then went up to the apartment roof. He chose a spot, sat down, and started sunbathing. An hour of sun made him restless. Forget it. I'll head to the beach, he decided. In this Man of Steel world, Xiao Ran didn't have to hold back his strength. The only people who could rival him were Clark and himself. No one else came close. With that thought, he pushed off the rooftop and headed toward the coast. Chapter 23. Section 23. Here, Xiao Ran could use his powers to his heart's content without worrying about being discovered. That wasn't possible in the Zongman world. He had no idea how many beings far stronger than him might exist there. Conceptual gods and demons might really be out there. He hadn't heard of a place called Academy City, but that didn't mean it didn't exist. It only meant he didn't know about it. For the past decade, he'd thought his world was just a patchwork of slice-of-life anime settings. The lucky part was he'd never run into anything truly supernatural during those years. Otherwise, he might never have lived to see his system activate. After hanging the laundry to dry, Xiao Ran left Metropolis. When he thought of American beaches, Miami immediately came to mind. Sand, waves, tropical vibes. Sure, it had its share of crime, but he wasn't here for that. Just the sun, and maybe a pretty face. The distance from Metropolis to Miami was roughly 2,000 kilometers. At his speed, it would have taken less than half a minute, but this time he didn't push for maximum velocity. He flew at about Mach 2, enjoying the Atlantic scenery. Suddenly, several sonic booms sounded from behind. He glanced back to see 3 fighter jets closing in at around Mach 2.4. Was he detected by a U.S. military satellite? Xiao Ran wondered, but he didn't worry. Even if the whole military knew about him, a few nuclear bombs wouldn't frighten him. He grinned. All right, I'll play. He slowed to a complete stop. The jets, still moving, instantly overtook him and reported back in a flurry. Target lost. Report. Target lost. As the pilots spun to find the vanished contact, a violent sonic boom ripped through the sky and a streak of afterimage passed them, overtaking the 3 fighters in a blur before disappearing. What was that? One pilot shouted. A meteor? He's so fast, another replied. None of them expected a person to be the thing that had flown past them. After all, how could a human fly? And at such speed? It was, of course, Xiao Ran. He had accelerated suddenly to surpass the jets, reaching about Mach 20. The pilots only saw an indistinct streak before it was gone. After flying a distance, he smiled and circled back, then began to weave past the fighters in different patterns, teasing them. Inside an East Coast airbase, a colonel barked into a microphone. Their pilots were being toyed with, and that was an insult they would not tolerate. Permission to use air-to-air missiles. Shoot down the target. The 3 fighter pilots lit up at the order. The target couldn't be locked by radar, so they switched to manual aiming. Come on, you bastard. Come at us again if you dare, one muttered, hands steady on the controls. Another sonic boom announced Xiao Ran's reappearance. The pilots locked sights and fired. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. 6 air-to-air missiles streaked out, fanning to cut off his escape. Xiao Ran glanced at the missiles closing in. He'd been teasing them for fun, first blazing at Mach 20, then deliberately slowing because extreme speed was boring. Now, the missiles were catching up, and the pilots felt confident. If he'd kept at Mach 20, ordinary missiles couldn't close the gap, but he'd reduced his speed. "I'm done playing," he decided. He whipped back around and unleashed a concentrated heat beam. The 6 missiles exploded in a storm of flame and black smoke. The pilots, watching through a haze of debris, couldn't be sure whether the missiles had struck anything, but one of them muttered, "Did you just see a red flash?" "No," another said. A third also denied it. As one pilot began to doubt himself, a red shaft of light tore through the smoke and shot toward them. "There it is," someone shouted. Boom! The first fighter jet disintegrated under the beam, exploding midair. Boom! Boom! The second and third were hit in quick succession and suffered the same fate. 3 jets worth over $300 million turned to scattered debris. Xiao Ran hovered high above, watching the distant explosions. Then, with a final glance, he vanished at incredible speed. Later, on the beach, he lounged in swimwear on a deck chair, sipping a cold drink and sunning himself as if nothing had happened minutes earlier. After a day of soaking up the sun and sampling local delicacies, he watched the sunset and left Miami, crossing the globe to another scenic shoreline on the far side of the Blue Star. He spent half a day sea fishing, but luck didn't seem to be on his side. He hadn't caught a thing. "That can't be right," he said, annoyed. He strode into the surf and, using only his hands, hauled out a massive fish, hundreds of pounds, long and thick. He snapped a quick selfie with the struggling catch and released it back into the water. "Impossible to fail when it's me." He looked at the photo, grinned, and sent it to the only contact in his phone, Clark. "Look at the fish I caught." It was midnight in Smallville. The message sound woke Clark. He sat up and opened the photo. The observant Clark noticed a particular detail in the picture right away. Chapter 24, Section 24. "You didn't fish these yourself, did you? You actually went into the sea and caught them, right?" Clark sent the message and imagined Xiao Ran's exasperated face when he read it. He couldn't help smiling. "Serves you right for waking me up in the middle of the night." Clark wasn't exactly an honest man either. He liked a little payback. In reality, when Xiao Ran saw Clark's message, he wasn't as annoyed as Clark pictured. He'd actually traveled over 10,000 kilometers to Kent Farm to have a talk with Clark. Afterward, Clark admitted his mistake and apologized, and Xiao Ran, magnanimous, forgave him. Clark watched Xiao Ran leave with a stunned look. A day passed. Feeling that he'd had his fun, Xiao Ran finally returned to his home in Metropolis. "Sleep," he murmured to himself. After washing up and changing into pajamas, Xiao Ran lay down and closed his eyes. When he woke and checked the system panel, he found his stats had increased after basking in the sun for a few days. Strength had gone up by 20,000 tons, and his speed by 4 Mach. He grinned at the numbers and thought, with this, even if Zod showed up, I wouldn't lose in a one-on-one. System profile. Name, Xiao Ran. Gender, male. Lifespan 17,400 years. Strength, 830,000 tons. Defense, can withstand a 10 million ton nuclear blast. Speed, Mach 206. Bloodline, Kryptonian. Superpowers, stellar energy, heat vision, bioelectric orb for breath, supervision, super hearing, super intellect, extracted entry, steel body, Superman available, extraction 0. It was Wednesday. After getting up, Xiao Ran helped Yoko Okino with a math problem, so he didn't have time to prepare breakfast. "I'm going to school," he said, pulling on his uniform. "If you're hungry, order something, or there are ingredients in the fridge, cook something yourself." Yoko was still buried under the covers. She stuck out a hand and waved it weakly, sounding as if she didn't have the strength to speak. Xiao Ran closed the door behind him. After he went downstairs, Yoko slowly dragged the covers away from her face. "How is that guy like an ox? Doesn't he ever get tired?" she muttered, then paused. "But did I lose or gain from this?" She thought about it. Xiao Ran had promised, more than once, to keep her secret about giving money to Fujiaki Yoshi. Even though Xiao Ran had never intended to spread the story in the first place, Yoko had still worried herself sick. From one angle, she'd lost. From another, she'd gained. After all, Xiao Ran was young and handsome. Yoko, who thought of herself as an older aunt, couldn't deny that she'd been flattered. People are visual creatures, she said to herself, and celebrities are no different. A darker thought made her frown. The reason she'd been in a foul mood at the izakaya last night wasn't only that Fuji Akiyoshi had killed himself in her house and tried to frame her. At the police station, she'd also been told that all her upcoming work had been suspended for the time being. The company wanted her to rest and recover, which was their polite way of saying they were measuring how much the incident would damage her popularity. If the fallout was minor, she could go back to work. If fans fled her in droves, the break could be extended indefinitely. After worrying for a bit, fatigue won out and she drifted back to sleep. There was nothing she could do about it now. Xiao Ran didn't concern himself with how long Yoko might stay at his place. On his way to Teitan High School, he thought about buying a motorcycle. Getting a license wouldn't be hard, could be arranged for a price. The problem was money. He had only a couple of million yen in the bank, barely enough to get by. Starting a company to make money sounded like too much effort. If he could extract an entry that let him control minds, he could just take control of all the shareholders of a big corporation. Problem solved. For now, he remembered the case Conan and his friends would get involved in soon. A stash of maple leaf coins, 15,000 coins worth about 600 million yen. If he needed cash, he could keep those. They would be confiscated otherwise, might as well benefit himself. I'll keep an eye on Conan and his group for the next few days, he thought. As soon as they find the cipher map, I'll intercept it. Class B, second year. Xiao Ran saw Sunoko and Ran sitting together and went over to greet them. Xiao Ran, you're just in time. I heard you met Yoko Okino last night and someone died in her house? Sunoko gossiped, face alive with curiosity. Yeah, Xiao Ran said, setting down his bag and sitting. The dead man was named Fuji Akiyoshi. I think he was unstable. Who goes to someone's house to kill themselves in a way that frames the host? It doesn't add up. Seems like he had some mental issues. Sunoko agreed loudly. Ran wanted to say the same, but out of respect for the dead, she kept quiet. They complained about Fuji Akiyoshi for a while, then Sunoko brightened. Remember I said I was going to buy tickets for Kosei Island? Turns out my family invested in that horror-themed amusement park. My parents are going on opening day, so we can just go with them. Would that bother your uncle and aunt's work? Ran asked, a little concerned. Don't worry, it's fine. What kind of work do they have? They'll just drink and chat. Boring adult socializing, Sunoko said breezily. At noon in the cafeteria, Xiao Ran met Yotsuya Miko and Baihei Chuanhua. He had promised Baihei Chuanhua he would treat them to lunch, so he sat with them and asked what they wanted. As soon as he sat down, Yotsuya Miko gave him the secret hand signal they'd agreed on yesterday, the one that meant an evil spirit was nearby. Good heavens. He'd just dealt with one yesterday, and now another today? Wait, could this be Fuji Akiyoshi's ghost? They went up to the school's back mountain. Same as before. Point it out to me, Xiao Ran said. Yotsuya Miko nodded. She couldn't look directly at the spirit. Making eye contact would tell it that someone could see it and might trigger an attack. So she turned her head slightly away and used her finger to indicate a direction without looking straight at it. Over there? Xiao Ran confirmed, then wheeled around and unleashed a blast of heat vision. Ah! Shrieks sliced the air. A twisted black mist formed and shivered under the heat before dissolving into nothing, vanishing without a trace. Is it dead? Xiao Ran asked Yotsuya Miko. Yes, it's dead. She nodded then, curiosity getting the better of her, asked, Xiao Ran, why do you always get bothered by spirits? First, tell me what it looked like. Yotsuya Miko described the apparition she had seen. As she spoke, Xiao Ran's heart sank with recognition. The spirit had a knife lodged in its chest. It was plump, and its face was grotesquely distorted. Miko's only words for it had been horrifyingly ugly. Xiao Ran was sure it was Fuji Akiyoshi's ghost. He had good reason. The knife, the body type, the ruined face, those details matched what he'd seen. But why would Fuji Akiyoshi's hatred latch onto him? Xiao Ran had never even met the man. The only thing that could explain it was the incident last night, Perhaps the ghost had first been attached to Yoko Okino and, for some reason, had shifted its resentment. Yotsuya Miko explained ghosts the way she knew. They carried no memories of their lives and had no real intelligence. They were simply manifestations of pure resentment or similar strong emotions, driven by rules rather than thought. If you couldn't see them, they couldn't actively attack you. What they did was cling and drain your life energy. Some people replenished that energy by eating. For example, Bai Hua often got tangled up in lots of spirits and ended up with an enormous appetite. In other words, these things literally leached vitality. Wouldn't that be convenient for anyone on a diet? Xiao Ran couldn't help smiling at the absurdity. Do you know the spirit? Miko asked. Yes, I happened to see the murder scene yesterday. If I'm not mistaken, that's the person who died. Ah, so it's that terrifying? Miko shivered. Next time I see a crowd around a dead person, I won't get close. That's not necessarily true, Xiao Ran said. Otherwise, hospitals and crematoria would be swarming with spirits. Most people probably don't become spirits when they die. Miko nodded. After all, if every death produced a spirit, the world would indeed be overrun. Yet she only encountered them occasionally. They left the back mountain together, then parted ways. Miko went off to find Bai Hua, and Xiao Ran, hands in his pockets, strolled toward his classroom. He hadn't gone far when a familiar figure blocked his path. Xiao Ran, we need to talk, Conan said, his expression serious. All right, let's sit over there. Xiao Ran led him to a pair of empty chairs and sat down. He studied Conan with an ironic smile. What do you want to talk about? Conan tensed the instant he saw that smile. He'd learned over time what it meant. Xiao Ran had guessed something. Conan's temper flared. That look makes me want to punch you every time, he snapped. Is that so? You can't. Xiao Ran kept the same teasing grin. If only I weren't small, Conan thought. He would have pummeled him. Instead, he had to swallow the thought and try another tack. Do you know something? Conan asked, clinging to a sliver of hope that Xiao Ran might not realize the truth. Xiao Ran leaned in close, all mock seriousness. You guessed it, didn't you? Well, then I guess I'll just have to kill you to keep you quiet. Conan jumped out of his skin and tried to bolt from the chair, but Xiao Ran pinched him in place with one hand. Let go! Conan struggled until Xiao Ran suddenly let go and burst out laughing. Kudo, you should have seen your face. It was priceless. Conan stared. He was furious. Xiao Ran, you did that on purpose. And you do know my name, Xiao Ran said, still smiling. He had just called him Kudo. How could Conan have missed the implication? Is that so hard to guess? Xiao Ran's laughter faded. You reverted in age. You didn't become a different person. You're wearing the exact same clothes as before, and a lot of people would think someone who suddenly looks like a child is just hiding behind a disguise. Besides, the glasses are a decent attempt at covering it. Conan looked down, his face darkening. He was wearing the Teiton elementary uniform. The school had kept that style for years. Change clothes? Where would he go to change? Transfer schools. The thought was absurd. He bristled at Xiao Ran's "you're not too stupid" compliment. He wasn't pleased at being called merely not too stupid. Xiao Ran, this time the situation is complicated, Conan said at last. I need you to keep this secret. Xiao Ran regarded him with open disbelief. After all the times he'd been asked to keep secrets, why should he do it for someone who just barged into his life? What's that expression? Conan's anger rose. Why are you so annoying? Why didn't I notice earlier? Xiao Ran cocked his head. Kudo, has anyone ever told you that you're dreaming? Conan fell silent. No. Are you asking for hush money? How much do you want? Conan was speechless. Money? Am I that kind of person? Xiao Ran waved his hand. I don't want money. If anyone heard me say that, they'd think I was some hooligan shaking down kids for pocket change. Then what do you want? Conan ignored the rest. He'd learned it was safer to only listen to half of anything Xiao Ran said. The other half tended to be aggravating, better to mentally block it out. Xiao Ran looked him up and down and smiled in a way that made Conan's heart race. He even got goosebumps. In this state, you're probably beyond saving, right? You're talking nonsense, Conan snapped, so agitated he nearly leaped up. I'll find a way to change back for sure. But what if you can't? Conan went silent. If you can't, then I'll just wait for you to grow up. It's not like you won't grow up eventually. Conan snorted and turned away, but the idea of waiting was only a last resort. He wanted to return to his old self as soon as possible. Xiao Ran, meanwhile, watched him with a calculating look. Time in this world seemed normal now, but with timelines already tangled and multiple similar worlds merged, nothing could be trusted to proceed in a straightforward way. Letting Conan simply grow up might mean he never got back what he'd lost. "Hey, what's with that face? Thinking something naughty?" Xiao Ran teased. Conan read the look and felt a prickle of unease. "Nothing," Xiao Ran said lightly. "Kudo, never mind. I'll just call you Conan. How old are you now?" Conan's expression darkened. 7, but I'll change back." "So in 10 years you'll be 17 again," Xiao Ran said. "By then Ran will be 27. Do you think she won't fall in love with someone during those 10 years? "Impossible." At the mention of Ran, Conan bristled and jumped up. "Don't be so sure. Among people you know, how many of them are 27 and have never been in love?" Xiao Ran asked with a chuckle. Conan didn't want to think about it. He grabbed his hair and rubbed his eyes hard. "No, Ran will definitely not fall in love with anyone else." The thought of Ran with another man was unbearable. It felt like his knees were about to give out. "It seems you know the odds are high," Xiao Ran said, patting Conan's head. "So instead of letting someone else take advantage, why not leave it to me?" Conan froze and slowly turned to stare at Xiao Ran. "Conan, leave Ran's future happiness to me," Xiao Ran said, all sweetness. In Conan's eyes, he looked like a devil revealing horns and a tail. "Good heavens! I'm going to scratch your face!" Conan lunged in fury. Xiao Ran picked him up easily with one hand. "Oh dear, look at you getting flustered again," he said, amused. Conan struggled, but he couldn't touch Xiao Ran. After a while, he tired and gave up, pouting as Xiao Ran set him down. Xiao Ran smiled at him. "Conan, accept it. To love someone, you have to learn to let go. Someone once told me that." "I won't let go," Conan cried. He couldn't fight Xiao Ran with his small limbs, so all he could do was shout. "Besides, I believe in Ran. She'll wait for me." "Wow, are you really that selfish, expecting Ran to wait for you 10 years? Xiao Ran looked at him with mild disdain. Conan fell apart. He didn't want to argue anymore. He jumped off the chair and walked away, shoulders slumped so low a few passing students couldn't help but stare. "Look, why does that kid look so defeated? Maybe his favorite toy got stolen. He's just a kid after all." Conan heard that and nearly burst into tears. He covered his ears and ran out through Taiten High's main gate. Chapter 33. Treating Miko and Xiao Hua to a meal. Yoko Okino's resentment. Watching Conan run off, Xiao Ran grinned. Teasing Conan is pretty fun. He really fell apart. He slapped his thigh suddenly and looked regretful. "Oh no, I forgot to take a picture for posterity." He thought of how unlikely it might be to make Conan break down like that again and felt a pang of disappointment. What a shame. A few photos would have been a great souvenir. Too late now. Next time, he decided, then rose and headed toward the main teaching building. School let out around 4 in the afternoon. Xiao Ran waited by the door of Class C for Yotsuya Miko and Bai Chuanhua to come out, and the three of them left together. "Have you decided what to eat?" Xiao Ran asked Bai Chuanhua. "Barbecue," Bai Chuanhua exclaimed, eyes lighting up. She had thought it over the night before and settled on barbecue. It was pricey and not something she could have often. "Barbecue?" Xiao Ran smiled. "What a coincidence. I know a place with great food. I'll take you there." Thank you, Xiao Ran." Bai Chuanhua hugged his arm gratefully, already imagining the delicious meal. "Xiao Hua," Miko pulled her closer. "Be careful. Xiao Ran's a boy," she whispered. "Oh," Bai Chuanhua nodded distractedly. Her mind was on the barbecue. They hailed a taxi, and Xiao Ran sat in the passenger seat to give the driver the address. The taxi dropped them at the entrance of a well-recommended barbecue restaurant. Xiao Ran led them inside, and a waiter greeted them immediately. "How many?" he asked. 3. "Please find us a good table," Xiao Ran replied. "Right this way." The waiter led them to an empty table, then spoke into his walkie-talkie. "Table C18, 3 guests." He placed menus on the table. "Look through these and order anything you like." Xiao Ran slid the menu toward Miko and Bai Chuanhua. "Order first," he said. I'll do it. Bai Chuanhua, unable to contain herself, grabbed a menu and began picking items. The restaurant's atmosphere was pleasant, but the best part was the food. and the service. Dedicated waiters handled the grilling for the customers, so the diners only had to sit back and eat. Service first, the place's motto seemed to be. Chapter 27, Section 27. Of course, the price was a little higher than average, but Xiao Ran thought it was a good deal. The three of them ate barbecue from around 5 in the afternoon until past 7, over 2 hours of food. Mostly Xiao Ran and Bai Chuanhua kept eating. Yotsuya Miko had a small appetite and was full early, so she spent most of the meal nursing a glass of juice and only finished the last sip as they were getting ready to leave. The final bill, 60,000 yen. When Yotsuya Miko saw it, she nearly jumped out of her skin. "Did we really eat that much?" she asked, staring at the receipt. "The per-person average here isn't actually that high, about 8,000 yen, but we did eat a lot," Xiao Ran said, took the bill, and paid. 60,000 yen wasn't much to him. In a few days he'd be getting 600 million, so this dinner was nothing by comparison. The important thing, he thought, was enjoying the meal. "That's still expensive," Yotsuya Miko protested. Xiao Ran's spending habits were on a different level from hers. 8,000 yen per person felt lavish. Still, she had to admit the food was excellent and the meat top quality. That only made the total all the more surprising. Afterwards, they hailed a taxi. Outside the car, as she slid in, Yotsuya Miko called, "Xiao Ran, next time I'll treat, but I can't afford anything this expensive." "It's fine. It's the thought that counts," Xiao Ran replied with a smile and waved them off. "Xiao Ranjun, bye-bye." Bai Chuanhua poked her head out and waved. Bye-bye," Xiao Ran said. Once the taxi carrying Yotsuya and Bai Chuanhua had driven off, Xiao Ran hailed another cab for himself. "Mahua Town, 3 Chom, Lot 3, he told the driver after getting in. The man smiled. "All right, please take a seat, sir." They set off. After a half-hour ride, Xiao Ran arrived home. Opening the door, he found Yoko Okino sitting in the living room, watching television. "You're still up?" he said as he came in. Yoko could only roll her eyes. "Do you not want to see me that much?" she teased. "Not that. Aren't you a big star? How come you're so idle?" Xiao Ran strolled to the refrigerator, grabbed a can of cola, popped it open, took a sip, and glanced at her. "All my recent work's been cancelled. It's because of that scoundrel Fujiaki Yoshi," Yoko snapped, anger spiking at the mention of his name. The thought of him made her bristle. Xiao Ran sat down beside her, put an arm around her shoulders, and said lightly, "It's good to get some rest. Just don't let it freeze you out." "Jinx," Yoko smacked him, annoyed. If she were really frozen out, her acting career would be over. "Did you eat?" Xiao Ran asked casually. "I did. I ordered takeout," she said, then shot him a resentful look. He'd left in the morning and only returned at 8 in the evening. Didn't he even care if she'd eaten? "Good," he said, not pressing whether she'd been discovered or not. She'd been an idol for years. She could handle herself. "I'm tired. Let's go. Stop watching TV," he said, and without more ado, he picked Yoko up and headed for the bedroom upstairs. She gave him an irritated glare. "Tired? Really?" But didn't refuse. Ever since the previous night, she'd caught herself feeling a little infatuated with this younger man a few years her junior. Maybe younger men were the way to go. This stinky little brother was actually pretty great. After 11 at night, Xiao Ran took a quick shower, felt refreshed, and slid into bed. Yoko had slipped away quietly while he was bathing. She'd chickened out. Pulling the covers up and closing his eyes, he fell asleep soon after. When he woke again, he was back home in Metropolis, the Man of Steel world. It was 6 in the morning. He got up, washed quickly, then as usual found a sunny spot to lie in and ate something. The day passed lazily. Despite having blown up 3 American fighter jets earlier offshore, the U.S. hadn't come after him. Perhaps they couldn't find him, or perhaps they dared not. Either way, it didn't affect Xiao Ran. He spent the day sunbathing. When it got dark in America, he flew to the other side of the globe and continued. His main focus was hard work. Not long after he'd settled to sunbathe, a commotion started not far away. He sat up, took off his sunglasses, and looked toward the crowd. People were gathered around a shop window where a television had abruptly switched channels. No matter how they tried to change it, the screen stayed fixed on a single image. "You are not alone. In the universe, you are not unique," the broadcast intoned. Xiao Ran pushed through the crowd and stared at the blurry face filling the screen. "Zod, The old general from Krypton had finally arrived. "They're finally here," he muttered. On the TV, General Zod's voice continued, issuing a global demand. "Kal-El, surrender him. He is hidden among you. He looks like you, but he is not one of you." Zod was threatening war unless humanity handed over a Kryptonian named Kal-El. Xiao Ran thought of Clark. He must have seen it too. Without hesitation, he stepped out of the crowd, shot into the sky with a sharp crack of air, and vanished toward the distant horizon in an instant. The crowd erupted into stunned exclamations. "Oh my God, he just flew away. Is he the person they're talking about on TV? Kryptonians really do look like us. Please don't let him run. What will we humans do then? Maybe he's going to find the Kryptonian on TV. Do you think he'll surrender? He's a Kryptonian. There's an old Eastern saying, those not of our kind are sure to have different hearts. What does that mean? It means you can't trust people of a different race." Chapter 28, Section 28. Can we humans defeat the Kryptonians? Haven't the movies shown it? Humanity will surely triumph. Xiao Ran didn't stick around to listen to the arguments. In less than half a minute, he had covered more than 10,000 kilometers and arrived in Smallville, Kent Farm. Clark, as Xiao Ran expected, was watching the scene unfold on the television when he landed in the yard and walked up to the house. "Clark!" Xiao Ran called as he pushed open the door. "You're here," Clark replied, his face grave. Xiao Ran glanced at the TV and then at Clark. "Zod is looking for you. What are you going to do?" Clark looked bewildered. "I don't know." His thoughts were in turmoil. His instincts told him Zod couldn't be trusted, but could he trust humanity instead? Clark couldn't answer that with certainty. "If you need my help, say the word," Xiao Ran said. He didn't want to force a decision. "Think it over carefully. Even if it comes to war, I'll stand by you." Xiao Ran's mission was to stop Zod. He knew Zod's forces outnumbered them. If Xiao Ran faced them alone, he might not win. With Clark at his side, however, they had a real chance. "Thanks, Xiao Ran." Clark's expression softened. True friendship, he thought, shows itself in crisis. Anyone can be pleasant when things are easy. A friend is the one who stays when trouble comes. At that moment, the lights snapped back on, and the television returned to normal programming. Clark turned and saw his worried mother standing nearby. He crossed the room and hugged her. "Don't worry, it'll be all right. I'll take care of this." "Clark," Martha said, voice trembling, "if it doesn't work, if you can't do it, just leave. Go far away." She wasn't speaking of duty or sacrifice. She was speaking as a mother, terrified of losing her son. After he left Clark's house, Xiao Ran received a message from Clark and hurried back to find him. "Have you decided?" Xiao Ran asked. "Yes, I've decided. I want to trust humanity for once." Clark sounded steady. He had thought all night. He knew General Zod wasn't to be trusted, but the people of Earth didn't know that. If he didn't step forward now, Zod would likely attack humanity with overwhelming technology and force. Clark realized he had to act, for humanity, for his mother, and for himself. "All right, I'll stay here in case Zod's group tries anything," Xiao Ran said. He knew that once Clark turned himself in, Zod would come to Kent Farm looking for the Codex. What Zod didn't know was that Krypton's Codex had already merged with Clark. Clark himself was the Codex, not some item on a small ship. "Okay, I entrust my mother's safety to you," Clark said. "When are you leaving?" Xiao Ran asked. "Now." Clark ripped open his shirt, revealing the familiar Superman suit beneath. He floated slowly up, then with a sudden burst accelerated into the sky at supersonic speed. "I'm leaving. I'm entrusting this place to you," Clark called, and then he was gone. Xiao Ran watched him go for a long moment, then turned away and reached for the box he had brought. He opened it to reveal the white and gold armored suit inside. Xiao Ran tore off his outer clothes to reveal the black Kryptonian warrior suit beneath. Then he pulled on his own battle armor. A snow-white cape snapped out behind him in the wind. The gold-trimmed white plating only heightened Xiao Ran's aura of sanctity. Kent stepped out of the house as well. "The armor is beautiful," she said, admiring it. Then she looked toward the distant horizon. "Clark has grown up. Maybe today is the moment Jonathan kept talking about." Jonathan Kent, Clark's adoptive father, had always believed the world wasn't ready for someone like Clark. And with General Zod's threats hanging over humanity like a sword of Damocles, now was exactly the time for Clark to step forward. If ever there had been a moment for the world to meet Superman, this was it. Outside the military base, Clark descended like a god. He hovered above the earth, looking down at the rifles and tank barrels already trained on him. "I am Kal-El," Naki said, voice calm and steady, "the one you are looking for." The soldiers around him took an involuntary step back, a living Kryptonian who could fly, and yet he looked human in every way. For many of them, this was the first time they had seen a being from another world, and the sight unsettled them. "I'm General Swanwick, commander of this base," a black general stepped forward. "General, perhaps we can speak somewhere more private." "All right," Clark agreed. Two soldiers approached carrying handcuffs. They trembled as they moved. They were uncertain whether to act. Clark offered his hands without hesitation. The soldiers visibly relaxed. This Kryptonian was not hostile, at least not to them. In the interrogation room, Lois Lane sat opposite Clark. "Why did you let them cuff you?" she asked. She had seen enough to know that, if Clark wanted to, he could prevent those cuffs from ever closing. Clark glanced at the small metal links. "It helps them feel more at ease," he said. Lois's expression softened. There was something about him, an earnestness, almost pitying kindness, that made her rethink what she thought she knew. "Do you know the people in the sky?" she asked. General Swanwick had brought her in precisely to gather any information he could from the only person who had a connection to those Kryptonians. "That is General Zod," Clark said, eyes fixed on the one-way glass. "Krypton's supreme military commander." "Can he see us?" Lois asked, nodding at the mirrored window. Swanwick and the scholars stationed on the other side had assured them it was one way. "Impossible. We can see them. They can't see us," Swanwick said. He didn't know about X-ray vision. The one-way glass meant nothing to Clark. He could see everything beyond it. "General Zod is extremely dangerous," Clark said quietly. "He won't spare humanity simply because I surrender." "Then, why did you come?" Lois pressed. "Because I believe in humanity," Clark answered. He stood as the handcuffs snapped inward and broke in his hands. "Sorry, it was brittle." He walked close to the one-way glass and fixed his gaze on Swanwick and the others. "You're afraid of me because you can't control me," he said. "You won't be able to. Not now, not ever. But that doesn't make me your enemy." On the other side of the glass, Swanwick felt certain now that Clark could see them. The Kryptonian's eyes were on him. Swanwick's job was to see clearly, not to pretend otherwise. "And who do you think the enemy is?" Swanwick asked. "Zod?" "That's what I'm worried about," Clark replied. "But even so, I must be handed over to them." Swanwick's jaw tightened. The order had come from the top, an order he could not refuse. He could argue, delay, probe, but when the chain of command demanded something, he had to obey. "Do what you must, General," Clark said. He had come prepared to face whatever came next. Outside the base, a small bug-shaped ship traced a graceful arc across the sky and settled in the compound's clearing. Its rear hatch opened, and two Kryptonian warriors in full battle armor stepped out. "They're here," a young officer announced. Inside, Colonel Hardy watched them nervously. "Relax," Swanwick told him, though he himself did not look entirely calm. "Do you really believe they'll leave once they take Clark?" Lois asked as she returned to the group. "Whether I believe it or not doesn't change the order," Swanwick said. He was the general on duty. Decisions above his rank would have to be made by those higher up. "They won't let it go," Lois said with certainty. At that moment, the deputy commander approached, Fiora, who walked with the cold confidence of someone used to being obeyed. "General Zod wants me to take her as well," she said, pointing to Lois. "You are not following our agreement. You have already taken your kin. She belongs to us." Colonel Hardy bristled. "She's a human. We can't just hand her over." Fiora's gaze was indifferent, her voice ice. "Are you telling me you'd report to General Zod that you refused to hand over the person he demanded?" "You don't have to tell me how I'll report it," Hardy retorted, but his shoulders were already slick with sweat. Fiora's eyes made him feel small, like an insect under a boot. "No, I'll go with them," Lois said suddenly, stepping forward. She wasn't afraid to die. If Clark had been willing to stand up for humanity, she could not shrink from doing the same. "It's all right," she added to Hardy, and despite the tension, she found herself admiring the man who had arrested her earlier, the one who had, in that brief moment, stood where it mattered. Fiora ignored the gesture. To her, humans were beneath consideration, ant-like creatures that could be crushed without a second thought. General Swanwick didn't need to know why General Zod insisted they bring that human woman aboard. He only needed to follow orders. Fiora had taken Clark and Louise onto the small ship, and before anyone could react, it shot into the sky and vanished over the horizon. "General, should we be preparing for war?" Colonel Hardy asked. Swanwick turned to him. "Do you think they'll keep their word?" "Kryptonians aren't to be trusted," Hardy said bluntly. From the way that female Kryptonian had acted, he had little faith in anything they'd promise. "Then prepare," Swanwick ordered. In truth, he didn't expect the Kryptonians to walk away from a habitable world. Clark had already told him Krypton was gone. If their planet had been destroyed, what would they do? They wouldn't set off on some long, unlikely search for distant worlds when a suitable one was at their feet. They'd take what they needed. Whether the locals agreed wouldn't matter. Put in their position, Swanwick figured they wouldn't abandon a planet so close and go looking for others. At the Kent farm, Xiao Ran watched the sky. Ordinary people wouldn't have been able to make out the scene beyond the atmosphere, but he could see clearly. The strange, octopus-like Kryptonian mothership hovered far above, and a small bug-shaped scout had just left it. After a short while, that little craft returned. So they took Clark, Xiao Ran thought. Louise Lane too. Why bring her along? To use her against Clark. Zod had already shown he would use Earth's people as leverage. Taking Louise seemed redundant. Maybe Zod wanted a simpler, more personal threat. Kill the chicken to frighten the monkeys. Empty threats were always less convincing. Soon, 2 more scout ships detached from the mothership and headed straight for Smallville. Xiao Ran flexed his wrists, cracked his neck, and told John Kent to hide in the basement until the visitors left. "Xiao, be careful," John called, ducking into the house. "Careful?" Xiao Ran grinned. They should be careful. He'd been sunning himself for weeks, building his strength, and had even learned combat techniques online with his supercharged memory. It was time to test them. The scout ships descended, blue exhaust trailing behind them, and touched down on the farm. One ship's hatch opened, and 4 Kryptonians in black battle armor stepped out. The leader, Zod, stared at the lone human in the doorway, frowning. "Who are you? Why are you wearing Kryptonian armor?" he demanded. Even though Xiao Ran's armor differed in color and style, Zod recognized it at a glance. "Sorry, this way is blocked," Xiao Ran said, stepping forward to bar their route. "General, let me handle him," Fiora said coldly, moving to the front. Zod inclined his head. His instincts as a general told him this young man wasn't ordinary. With a rush, Fiora launched herself at Xiao Ran. "Blue Star human, die!" she snarled, swinging a fist at his face. Humans were beneath them. Fiora expected the strike would end him. She badly underestimated Xiao Ran. Instead of crumpling, Fiora slammed into the ground with a crash that carved a shallow crater and sent cracks radiating through the soil. Dirt and debris flew everywhere. Xiao Ran barely seemed winded. Before she could recover, he had seized her head and yanked her upright. "Who did you say you were going to kill?" he asked. He tossed her, then delivered a sharp kick that sent Fiora hurtling away. She broke the sound barrier. Her body struck her own scout ship with a cataclysmic impact. The hull ruptured, and in an instant the craft blew apart, erupting into a towering fireball. Everything happened in seconds. Zod and the other Kryptonians had no time to pull Fiora free before Xiao Ran finished her. Zod narrowed his eyes. "I didn't expect another of our kind on this planet," he said coldly. "Are you going to check if your subordinate's dead?" Xiao Ran asked. "No need," Zod said flatly. "If Fiora is dead, she will be buried as a martyr, buried on our new home." Xiao Ran snorted. "Zod, aren't you a little overconfident? You are powerful, more powerful than Kal-El," Zod declared, stepping to either side with 2 comrades. Now it was 3 against 1. "And what help do you have?" Zod taunted. "Are you counting on those humans?" "Help? Of course I've got help, and he's already here." Xiao Ran flashed a grin. Before Zod could respond, a blur struck him. "Blue Star doesn't welcome you, Zod." Clark grabbed the general by the throat and slammed him into the cornfield. Sparks of impact flashed as they rocketed across the farmland for kilometers, finally crashing into a row of natural gas storage tanks on the outskirts of Smallville. Explosions ripped the night apart. Boom after boom, engulfing the area in flames and blowing both combatants clear out of the blast. They tumbled onto the road. Clark scrambled to his feet, unharmed and alert. Zod did not fare so well. Chapter 31, Section 31. Although Zod wasn't wounded, the mask of his battlesuit had been cracked, letting Earth's air flood in. It was the same problem Clark had faced in the spaceship before he grew used to Krypton's environment. Zod, exposed to Earth's atmosphere for the first time in a long while, struggled in the same way. After his mask was damaged, countless voices washed over him, chaotic, overlapping, impossible to sort. It felt as if his skull would burst. "It's rough, isn't it?" Clark recognized the signs instantly. As he grew, abilities from his Kryptonian blood had surfaced gradually. Superhearing had tormented him for a time, and he'd learned, slowly, how to block it out. Zod was going through the same thing, only amplified. Zod was older, and his cells, starved for years, were now ravenously absorbing yellow sun energy. In a short time, his power had climbed close to Clark's level, and it was still skyrocketing. Only when every cell was full would the rate slow. "Damn it, Kal-El, don't think I'll let this go," Zod hissed, jaw clenched, clutching his head. "This planet will be mine." "No, not while I'm here," Clark replied. "I'll stop you, Zod." "Never," General Zod bellowed. Clark had had enough of words. If Zod wouldn't listen, fists would do the talking. He moved, but a hail of energy bolts slammed into him, sending him stumbling back. Kryptonian energy weapons were far deadlier than Earth's firearms, each hit seared. Clark gritted his teeth and endured the barrage while a small insect-shaped ship touched down. Two armored Kryptonian warriors climbed out and hauled Zod back aboard. "Don't think you can run," Clark shouted and lunged to stop them, but a figure slammed into him from behind and blasted him away. Over at the Kent farm, Xiao Ran watched the tiny ship depart. The warriors who remained in front of him flexed, ready. His eyes swept the cratered ruins behind him. Fiora hadn't appeared. He didn't know whether she'd been killed or was hiding to ambush. "Hey, tall guy, why so long and skinny?" Xiao Ran grinned at the lanky Kryptonian who stood like a telephone pole, at least 2 meters 6. The big man roared and charged, fists swinging. Xiao Ran caught the blow with one hand. "Too slow," he said, then kicked the chimney-like warrior hard enough to send him flying. "Traitor! Die!" The other warriors screamed and threw a flurry of punches like a storm. Xiao Ran dodged, slipped behind him, grabbed the back of his neck, hoisted him high and slammed him into the ground with a thunderous crack. The quake rattled the earth. Xiao Ran pummeled the warrior's face, 1 punch, 2, 3, and then the first, tall warrior recovered and came roaring back. Xiao Ran grabbed the second warrior and hurled him like a missile. The 2 armored soldiers cartwheeled through the air for over 1,000 meters. Xiao Ran leapt and closed the distance in an instant. The battlesuits were tough. Even after multiple 80-plus-ton punches, they still stood. "This armor's a pain," Xiao Ran muttered, and then accelerated. He dove at Mach 206, grabbed the tall warrior by the head as he rose, and slammed him into the ground again, carrying him over 10 kilometers before hurling him skyward. A crimson flare burned from Xiao Ran's eyes, full-power heat vision, and the airborne warrior exploded in a geyser of fire and smoke. A charred shape fell diagonally back toward Earth. Xiao Ran swooped down and caught him. The suit was torn, the body blackened, but the Kryptonian was still alive. "Kryptonians are stubborn," Xiao Ran said, looking up at the sun. He gripped the injured man and flew away. Half a minute later, he'd crossed hemispheres. Night had fallen here. There was no sun. Xiao Ran held the warrior face to face and unleashed full heat vision straight into his skull. The scream that followed was terrible. After 10 seconds, the beam tore through, and 2 streams of heat burst from the back of the victim's head, piercing his skull. First kill obtained. Chapter 39. Double kill. Missiles can't kill. America's High Command cowers. Xiao Ran retracted his beams and looked at the dead body. He flew toward North America with the corpse in his grasp, broke through the atmosphere, and flung it toward the moon. Let the Americans not get their hands on this, he thought, watching the body arc away. Better to leave it where human tech couldn't retrieve it for a long time, or bury them on Mars next time. Definitely not the sun. What if they revived? Mars would be safer. A few kilometers west of the Kent farm, another Kryptonian warrior roared, daring Xiao Ran forward. Xiao Ran smirked. With a single acceleration, he dove down at Mach 206. The ground exploded outward like a missile strike. The only difference was the absence of lasting flame. He drove the Kryptonian into the earth and pummeled him relentlessly, smashing the suit's mask. Sunlight could no longer reach them where they'd been forced underground. "Your companion's already on his way," Xiao Ran said, voice cold. "Go keep him company." Xiao Ran's voice barely left his lips before dazzling heat vision shot from his eyes, striking the Kryptonian warrior's face at point-blank range. The creature screamed and thrashed like a pig at slaughter, but it was hopeless. There was a wet, popping sound as brain tissue vaporized. Then the skull cracked with a sickening snap. The heat beam continued, gouging a hole through the ground so deep no one could tell how far it went. He just scored a double kill. Xiao Ran cut off the beam, grabbed the corpse, and tore up through the soil in a single, explosive ascent. A brilliant sonic boom blossomed in the sky as he breached the atmosphere at Mach 206. He tossed the body away, sending it arcing toward the distant moon, then pulled up and looked down at the blue planet below. The whole world zoomed larger in his vision until he could see the battle in Smallville, Fiora pressing Clark to the edge of the road. "Humph, so you're still alive," he murmured, and dove. Smallville, once a quiet town, had become a war zone. Explosive detonations, machine gun fire, whole blocks in flame. Just as Xiao Ran arrived, several American fighter jets screamed low and released air-to-ground missiles onto a blast zone. He watched one impact spread wreckage and fire through houses and shelters. The pilots clearly didn't care about anyone hiding below. Killing the Kryptonians justified collateral losses, it seemed, a few deaths for the greater good. Above, U.S. officials watched from a command center, faces taut with indecision. The missiles hadn't stopped Clark and Fiora from bursting out of the blast seconds later, still fighting amid the wreckage as if nothing had happened. The commanders went silent. Their weapons had proved useless. Their air-to-ground ordnance was embarrassingly ineffective. What could they do next? Anything stronger risked escalating to nuclear strikes, on their own soil. They had assessed how fast these Kryptonians were. They probably outran intercontinental missiles. For now, the sensible choice was to hang back and see who would prevail. Let the two of them tear each other apart first. On the street, Fiora poured scorn on Clark as she pummeled him. "I've been a Kryptonian warrior since birth. Countless drills, unending training. Where were you raised?" "On a farm." She slammed punch after punch into him. Physically, Clark had greater raw strength. He always had, but he'd spent years suppressing it, fighting to keep his powers under restraint. Aside from sparring with Xiao Ran, he'd never really fought. Fiora, by contrast, had been forged into a soldier, honed instincts, perfect timing, and the natural warrior gene that made training stick. It was like an ordinary man with good strength trying to stand up to a professional fighter who moved better, hit harder, and never hesitated. But every blow taught Clark something. His superbrain, dormant for so long, at last started working the way it should. Slowly, he began to read Fiora's motions, to match where she would strike and how she shifted her weight. What started as pure defense turned into the occasional counter. Fiora noticed the change and frowned. In her experience, Kryptonians were homogeneous. A child born to soldiers became a soldier. A child born to scientists became a scientist. She'd never seen those old days of natural birth, never seen a Kryptonian like Clark. If he was from a scientist's household, why was he picking up combat moves so quickly? That kind of adaptability should belong only to a warrior gene. Even other warrior-trained Kryptonians hadn't learned this fast. Clark landed 2 clean punches to her face, enough to stagger her, and Fiora's expression shifted from iron to alarm. Fury flared, and with it her power surged. Clark went from countering to getting flattened. She sent him flying with a kick. He smashed through the facade of a gas station, and, with a roar, the station erupted into a towering ball of fire. When the flames billowed and debris rained down, Clark lay dazed among the wreckage. He pushed himself up, shook his head clear, and walked out through the inferno. The blaze licked at him, but his bioelectric field sealed him off. The cape behind him was still bright and unblemished. He was just about to turn the tables, when a column of heat vision descended from the sky and drove Fiora into the earth like a stake. The ground buckled. A moment later, Someone landed. He wore a battle suit patterned in white and gold, a white cape snapping behind him. Not a towering figure, but the stance and presence made him look magnificent. Clark wanted to call his name, but there were soldiers watching from nearby and satellites tracking the scene above. Calling out would risk revealing his friend's identity. Besides, their bioelectric fields masked their faces. Anyone watching from a distance wouldn't see the real features. And no, the glasses thing was not the secret disguise. That was just a silly rumor. Instead, Clark remembered a favor he'd asked when the suit had been custom-made: change the S to an X. He called instead, "X!" Xiao Ran glanced over. "I saw you getting beaten," he said with a small smile. Clark's face went blank. He'd managed to land 2 punches, and now his friend only remembered the beating. Great friend, he thought inwardly. "Is she dead?" Clark asked, reluctant. These were his people. "Not yet, and she won't stay down long," Xiao Ran replied. He'd barely finished speaking when the earth shuddered, and Fiora burst up from the underground shaft, soil and rock flying. She saw Xiao Ran and spat, glaring with all the fury of a cornered warrior. "It's you again." Chapter 33. That bastard. He'd taken advantage of her being off guard and beat her at the farm earlier. Fiora hadn't sunk to his level. She'd charged ahead to support General Zod. But that persistent brute struck again. "Does he think I'm made of mud?" Fiora roared in fury and lunged forward. Xiao Ran answered with a blast of heat vision that sent her flying. Clark stared, stunned. He had been convinced they couldn't do that, until he saw Xiao Ran's expression, the look of someone who thinks you've just said something foolish. Clark felt his face warm with embarrassment. If only he'd realized sooner, if only he'd used it earlier, maybe things would have been different. "You go check on Aunt Martha at the farm. I'll take care of this," Xiao Ran said, then shot skyward in a blur. He caught up to Fiora midair and struck her with a single brutal punch. Her body slammed to the ground. He followed, raining blow after blow across her face until Fiora staggered, dazed and unable to counter. Her armor's faceplate had been shattered. Sounds and light flooded her head, and she couldn't center herself. Xiao Ran was not interested in mercy or debate. His aim was to eliminate every Kryptonian threat. He grabbed Fiora by the neck, driving her into the earth until the dirt swallowed them both. Fiora fought, but she was losing fast. With a final twist, Xiao Ran snapped her neck. Without sunlight to heal her, the injury was fatal. The light left her eyes, and she lay motionless. Xiao Ran stopped, staring at her unblinking gaze. He reached out, closed her eyelids, then scooped her body up and launched himself skyward. Meanwhile, Clark had returned to the Kent farm and found, to his immense relief, that his mother was safe. And Louise, who had flown off moments before, was there too. Clark dropped into a hug, grateful and almost giddy. "I'm so glad you're both okay." A moment later, Clark released them and looked at Louise. She asked, worried, "Clark, are you all right?" "I'm fine," Clark said. "I wasn't alone. I had help." "Help?" Louise repeated, puzzled. She turned as Xiao Ran descended into the yard, holding Fiora's body in one arm, landing with a casual thump. "A family reunion. Am I interrupting?" He joked. Louise stared at him. Then she looked at the woman he carried. She recognized Fiora, the Kryptonian warrior who had earlier taken her and Clark away, and the sight of her stirred unpleasant memories. "Hello, Louise," Xiao Ran said with a faint smile. Then he faced Clark. "Everyone who didn't escape has been dealt with. Only those still in the sky remain. What do you want to do? Want us to go finish them?" Clark's eyes were locked on the dead Kryptonian. "You killed her?" he asked, grief and disbelief mingling in his voice. Xiao Ran rolled his eyes. "Otherwise, it's an endless struggle, brother." Clark had to admit the hard truth in that. Still, seeing one of his own kind lying dead filled him with a crushing sorrow. Why had they come to Earth? Why couldn't there be peace? Clark's heart ached. Xiao Ran understood. After all, Clark was Superman, compassionate to the core. Without it, he wouldn't be who he was. "It seems you haven't decided yet. Talk it over. I'll take her where she belongs," Xiao Ran said, and with that he rocketed upward. In a blink he was gone, hurling Fiora's body toward the distant moon. He gave a casual clap. "Done," he murmured to himself. Back at the farm, Louise watched his departure, then turned to Clark. "Is he a Kryptonian too?" she asked, surprised. Clark nodded. "Yes, Xiao Ran is Kryptonian. He came to Earth 16 years after I did." Louise blinked. I had no idea, she said. The revelation settled over her. She realized she'd now met two Kryptonians, one who'd taken her before and one who was, improbably, a friend. While they talked, Xiao Ran had already flown back out. From a distance, he caught sight of Zod's ship. It was separating, splitting into two parts. The detached lower section wasn't just a module, it was a world engine, a device designed to alter an entire planet's gravity and environment to match Krypton's. Why tear a planet apart like that? Xiao Ran thought. Sentiment for home, perhaps. Kryptonians could adapt to Earth, but not vice versa. Krypton's gravity had been dozens of times stronger. If Zod succeeded in converting Earth to a Kryptonian world, almost all life here, humans and animals alike, would be unable to survive the new gravity and die. Clark needed no more explanation. The scope of the threat slammed into him. The idea of billions of lives wiped out in an instant was unbearable. Zod had crossed a line. He wasn't simply an invader anymore. He was a madman. There was nothing to negotiate with a plan like this. When Xiao Ran returned to the farm, Louise and Martha were gone. Clark stood alone in the yard, staring into the distance, thoughts drifting back over the years. Xiao Ran touched down beside him. "What's wrong? Are you thinking about your childhood?" he asked gently. Clark nodded. This farm held everything that felt like home to him. "I won't let Zod's plan succeed. I won't let the people and memories I love disappear." He turned to Xiao Ran, resolve hardening his features. "I still need your help. Only together can we stop him." "No problem," Xiao Ran said. "What's the plan?" Chapter 34. Section 34. Xiao Ran nodded. This was the plan all along. "Zod has activated the world engine," Clark said. "His ship's ghost engine is linked to it now. We have to sever that connection. Take the small craft that brought me here. It has a ghost engine too. If we force the two ghost engines to collide, they'll create a singularity and suck everything in." "Artificially creating a black hole," Xiao Ran said with a wry smile. "Not a bad idea. What about you? Are you going to the world engine yourself?" "Yes, I'll go after the world engine," Clark answered. The mission was deadly. Once the world engine was running, the area around it had been converted into Krypton's environment, the air, the gravity, everything. Clark would be affected and weakened there. "Can you handle it on your own?" Xiao Ran asked. Clark smiled at the challenge. "You once told me a man shouldn't say he can't." Xiao Ran returned the smile. "All right. Good luck to both of us." "Good luck." They held each other's gaze for a long moment. Then Xiao Ran turned toward the barn. A short time later, he came out carrying the small ship that had brought Clark to Earth. "Are you leaving straight away?" Xiao Ran asked. "No. I need to brief General Swanwick. We'll need human support," Clark said. Xiao Ran didn't object. He only needed to finish his objective. How the rest was handled didn't concern him. They landed at the military base. Xiao Ran set the little ship down on the runway with one hand. American soldiers gathered, curious as they watched the yellow-skinned, black-haired Asian youth. Clark landed beside him and strode toward the officers. "General Swanwick," Clark called. "Zod's already made his move. We have to move fast." "What do you propose?" Swanwick asked. His orders from above were to fully cooperate with the two Kryptonians and otherwise stand by. Let the Kryptonians fight and keep the military in reserve. Swanwick had no objection. He had seen what those beings could do. Their steel-like bodies shrugged off missiles like nothing. Let them take each other on for now. Clark quickly outlined the plan. When Swanwick heard Clark intended to go to the Indian Ocean alone to destroy the world engine, Louise beside him looked worried. But she knew Clark had to try. Without him, humanity faced annihilation. "Good," Swanwick said. "If that's decided, we'll give you everything we've got." His eyes drifted to Xiao Ran, who had already set the small craft down. "Superman, aren't you going to introduce him?" he asked. Clark introduced him simply. "This is my kin. You can call him Mr. X." "Mr. X." Swanwick looked at the golden X on Xiao Ran's chest and nodded. He stepped forward. "Mr. X, I'm putting the Metropolis flight assets under your control. Leave it to me. I'll send them all to meet their ancestors," Xiao Ran said with a grin. Swanwick's eyes narrowed slightly. The man before him gave a very different impression from Superman. Superman was the great, righteous type, kind, self-sacrificing, a saint. Mr. X, by contrast, did not seem the kind to sacrifice everything for others. That offhand line about sending people to meet their ancestors was chilling in a way Superman would never be. Still, Mr. X seemed allied with Superman, and with Superman present, Swanwick felt reassured that Mr. X wouldn't do anything outrageous. He also figured Mr. X had likely been living on Earth for some time, and while perhaps ill-tempered, probably not murderous. Swanwick's mind flickered to the recent unexplained shooting down of 3 F-35s. Only Superman or Mr. X had the power to pull that off, and Superman wouldn't. The suspicion nudged at him, but he kept it to himself. It wasn't the time to raise such a sensitive accusation. "Do you need any help?" Swanwick asked outright. "No," Xiao Ran said. "I can handle it. You should evacuate civilians if you can." After a quick word with Clark, Xiao Ran grabbed the little craft and shot into the sky, vanishing toward the horizon in an instant. "I should go too," Clark said. "Wait," Louise called, pulling him aside to say something else. Colonel Hardy approached Swanwick, noticing his pensive expression. "Is something wrong, sir?" "Nothing," Swanwick replied. He turned and went to organize support for Metropolis. Even if Mr. X insisted he didn't need assistance, the base would rush fighters, helicopters, and transports to back up the city. Metropolis. Xiao Ran arrived ahead of most of the reinforcements. The enemy vessel loomed in the distance like a gigantic octopus. He took the key Clark had given him, plugged it into the small ship's control panel, and started it up. "I'm giving you a present," Xiao Ran muttered, grinning. Cradling the tiny craft in one hand, he flew straight toward the alien ship. Zod himself was nowhere to be seen. Inside the sprawling vessel, remaining Kryptonian warriors clustered in the engine room where a Kryptonian scientist was operating the Ghost engine in tandem with the World engine on the other hemisphere to terraform the planet below. "Someone's coming. It's another traitor," a guard shouted when he spotted Xiao Ran approaching. A few warriors scrambled into small fighters and launched to intercept. Outside the alien ship, 2 small crafts, piloted by 4 Kryptonian warriors, surged out and opened fire with energy cannons to keep Xiao Ran at bay. "You think you can stop me?" Xiao Ran taunted. He twisted and rolled with S-shaped dodges, the energy beams slashing past as he closed the distance at terrifying speed, racing toward the octopus-shaped vessel. Chapter 35, Section 35. At that moment, countless people across Metropolis craned their necks to watch the spectacle in the sky. From a distance, some, unafraid, stopped fleeing and took out their phones and cameras to record what was happening. "You keep piloting. I'll go out and stop this traitor," one Kryptonian soldier said to his companion inside a small ship. He stood, opened the rear hatch, and leaped out, landing on top of the vessel. The same happened on another small ship. "You can't even fly, and you think you can stop me?" Xiao Ran sneered, not taking the 2 would-be heroes seriously at all. Bang! Bang! The 2 Kryptonians charged at him. "Stop right there!" they yelled, one attempting to tackle Xiao Ran, while the other aimed for the small escape pod in his hand, trying to destroy it. Xiao Ran wouldn't allow it. Boom! A crimson beam of heat vision shot out, striking one Kryptonian who had been heading for the pod. Caught off guard, he was blasted thousands of meters away. The other lunging soldier was faked out by Xiao Ran. With a deft dodge, he grabbed the back of the man's head and slammed him into a nearby small ship. Boom! A blue fireball erupted as the ship was pierced and exploded. The 2 Kryptonians, one on that ship and the one Xiao Ran had thrown, plummeted toward the ground. Who told them they couldn't fly? Seeing the destruction, the remaining Kryptonian ship immediately tried to change course and put distance between itself and Xiao Ran. But Xiao Ran wasn't going to let it escape. Boom! Another explosion. A blue fireball blossomed as Xiao Ran obliterated the second small ship with a single heat vision blast. "I told you, you can't stop me," Xiao Ran said with a scornful smile. On the ground, people who had witnessed the destruction erupted into a roar of cheers. Their celebrations, however, were premature. In the next instant, 4 Kryptonian soldiers fell from the sky, landing in 4 different parts of Metropolis. Those nearby stopped cheering and fled in terror. The 4 Kryptonians who had crashed looked up and saw Xiao Ran bearing down on a nearby ship, the escape pod in his hand. "No!" they screamed in fury. Unable to fly, they couldn't prevent what came next. Xiao Ran quickly took the key from inside the escape pod, Clark's escape pod, and with a powerful swing, hurled the pod at the massive Kryptonian ship that had drawn close. Then he turned and flew away. Within a second, he had put several kilometers between himself and the ship. From that distance, he watched the pod slam into the cruiser. A blinding white light erupted on impact. Xiao Ran turned his head away as a black hole silently formed at the center of the light. A terrifying sucking force twisted everything around it. Within a 100-meter radius, the vortex devoured everything. 3 Kryptonian soldiers and a Kryptonian scientist who remained on the ship were swallowed whole. 4 Kryptonians, powerless, were gone. 7 kills achieved. Xiao Ran watched until the black hole winked out. It had been tiny and horribly unstable, collapsing after only a second. If it had lasted even a moment longer, the planet below might have been in grave danger. Such a black hole's destructive potential would have dwarfed Zod's terraforming, an apocalypse rather than an environmental catastrophe. For Earth and its people, it would have been the end. On the ground, government's officials and ordinary citizens alike cheered at the sight of the alien ship's destruction, though not everyone rejoiced. In particular, Zod, who had just arrived piloting a scout ship, was furious. He had watched his vessel be swallowed, and his eyes burned with rage. Even more maddening, Clark had appeared in front of the ship. With the world engine in the Indian Ocean destroyed, Clark had rushed back to Metropolis. "Zod, your plan has failed. Surrender." Clark's voice boomed, carrying into the hull. "You wish," Zod roared. "If I take you alive and extract the codex from you, Krypton will have a future." Clark cut him off and dove, smashing through the ship's control room and appearing before Zod. Meanwhile, Xiao Ran found the 4 Kryptonians who had fallen into Metropolis. P.S. Thank you to reader brother Infinite Perfect Supreme, Shazam, for the 588 reward. Thank you, brother. Chapter 44, 10 kills achievement reached. Extraction count +1. "It's you, traitor. How dare you show your face here? I'll kill you," one of the Kryptonians charged, enraged. Xiao Ran taught him a lesson with a few quick blows. "You're too weak," he said. He grabbed the man. This soldier was far weaker than the Kryptonians, and Xiao Ran had already eliminated, and nowhere near Fiora's level. Xiao Ran didn't need to remove him from the sunlight. He simply twisted the man's head forcefully. Crack! His neck snapped a full 180 degrees. This ordinary Kryptonian was no match. Xiao Ran's current measured strength was 830,000 tons. The man before him was probably around 500,000 tons, and inferior in every other way. It was like a father disciplining a child. Holding the corpse in one hand, Xiao Ran shot skyward. After flying several hundred meters up, he scanned the city and found 3 Kryptonian soldiers gathered and slaughtering civilians in a rush to vent their anger. He flew straight at them. Before he arrived, he threw the corpse he held. With a thunderous impact, the thrown body struck a Kryptonian who had been seizing a black man, crushing him and slamming him headfirst into the ground. The human, having no invulnerability, was obliterated in a spray of gore, leaving nothing behind. Xiao Ran didn't spare a glance. He dove and seized another Kryptonian, raining dozens of brutal punches to the man's face. The soldier staggered, dazed. His faceplate shattered, his nose was broken, and blood covered his face. The punch landed, and a skin that even missiles couldn't pierce was split open like a blossom. Xiao Ran made it clear what he meant by "flowers so red." Another Kryptonian lunged to help, but Xiao Ran kicked him aside. "Die!" Heat vision scorched the blood-smeared warrior in front of him. With a sickening blast, the back of his head exploded. 9 kills. Xiao Ran let the corpse fall. The bioforce field around him kept not a single drop of blood or speck of debris from touching him. He turned to face another Kryptonian, who had just burst out of the ground. Seeing his companion's body, the newcomer charged with bloodshot eyes. Bang! Xiao Ran caught his neck with one hand and his fist with the other, wrenching hard until something inside him cracked. "Ah!" the Kryptonian screamed. Xiao Ran tightened his grip, channeling 830,000 tons of force through his small palm, enough to overcome even that steel body. In an instant, the man's neck collapsed inward, his face contorted, and he went limp. 10 kills. A system prompt chimed in Xiao Ran's ear. Ding! Congratulations, host, for achieving the hidden achievement Kill 10 Kryptonians. Reward, extraction count +1. Xiao Ran's eyes brightened. He opened his panel. The extraction count that had been 0 was now 1. Good. Combine that with the upcoming clearance achievement, and he'd have 3 chances to extract entries, plus 1 more free extraction next time he entered an American comic world. 4 opportunities in total. With 4 extractions, he could significantly boost his strength, maybe even stack another Kryptonian entry on top of his current Steel Body Superman entry. He squinted at the red-eyed Kryptonian still charging from a distance. No, 1 extraction was too precious to waste on that trash. He looked up. There, in the sky, was a far better target. The enraged Kryptonian had already lost his reason. He roared and charged forward like a living heat vision beam. But it never fired. Xiao Ran backhanded him and sent him sailing like a ragdoll. Annoying nuisance. He vanished from his spot and reappeared farther along the flight path, catching the flying Kryptonian. With a thunderous crack, a 100-meter building was split at the waist. The upper section collapsed dozens of meters and smashed down. People screamed and scattered as the upper half pancaked into the street. Xiao Ran had the Kryptonian's neck in one hand and dragged him through 5 or 6 more buildings, finally finishing him with a blast of heat vision. 11 kills. No extra achievement this time. Grabbing the bodies, Xiao Ran returned to where the other 3 lay, bundled all 4 corpses, and shot up through the atmosphere in a heartbeat. "Off you go," he muttered, hurling the 4 bodies one by one toward the moon. Then he turned and flew back to Metropolis. The city was a ruin. The center had already taken heavy damage from the Kryptonian ship's gravity device. The battle with the 4 Kryptonians had leveled more buildings. Before anyone could catch their breath, a massive black spaceship began to fall from the sky. It was enormous, much larger than any human structure, and it plowed through Metropolis, tearing up nearly a fifth of the city center. The ship itself stayed mostly intact, far tougher than Blue Star's buildings, but its interior wasn't spared. Clark's heat vision had cut through the ship's nursery, destroying the embryos that carried Kryptonian genes. Zod snapped. He staggered out of the fallen ship, stepping through dust and ruin, and reached out to catch a tiny ash motes drifting down like the remnants of his dream. It crumbled to dust in his hand. "My people are my everything," he cried, collapsing to his knees. "Everything I did was for Krypton, for my people. But now," he looked up at Clark, eyes bloodshot. "Now I have nothing." Clark stood some distance away, hollow-faced. He had destroyed the last hope of Krypton. He'd chosen Blue Star over his ancestral home. He felt the weight of it. "Zod, I never wanted this. You forced my hand," he said, voice tight with pain. Zod's face twisted into fury. "It's you, Kal-El. You personally destroyed my hope, the hope of Krypton," he bellowed, so loud it whipped up a cloud of dust. "You chose these humans over Krypton. You are a sinner to our world." Clark had no words that could justify what he'd done. If surviving as a defender of billions on Blue Star made him a traitor to Krypton, he would accept it. "Zod, you still have a choice," he said. Too many people had died today. He didn't want to keep fighting, especially not to the death over a lost future. Zod laughed, wild, scornful. "Do you think I, the supreme military commander of Krypton, would fear a traitor who grew up on a farm?" Bang! A figure landed beside Zod, putting a hand on his shoulder. "Zod, give up," Xiao Ran said as he appeared behind him. But in truth, Xiao Ran's calm words masked a different intent. His face gave nothing away, and his hand moved like water, ready for whatever would come next. Ding! "Do you want to extract the character entry for Target Drew Zod? Target Drew Zod has multiple character entries detected. Please choose one to extract." Whoosh! A list unfolded before his eyes. "General, the morale of the army you lead is harder to diminish, and your subordinates will be more loyal to you. Krypton criminal, you have committed serious crimes. You will appear abhorrent to those of good alignment and make a terrible first impression. However, you will be unusually well received by chaotic evil aligned characters, making it easier to recruit followers from that alignment. You will gain all the powers of General Zod, the steel body big boss of the steel body world. However, as 2 tigers cannot share one mountain, the original lord, General Zod, will despise you to the bone." General Zod had 3 entries in total. The first 2 were useless to Xiao Ran. He had no army to lead, and he wasn't interested in befriending chaotic evil types. Compared to the 3rd entry, the others were worthless. He didn't hesitate. System, extract the steel body big boss entry, Xiao Ran silently commanded. Ding, extraction successful. The extraction completed almost instantly, just like when he'd extracted Clark's steel body Superman entry. Power surged through him, not just raw strength, but all his physical attributes and abilities ramped up dramatically. He opened the system character panel. Nender, male lifespan, 17,400 years. Strength, 1.68 million tons. Defense, can withstand a 20 million ton equivalent nuclear explosion. Speed, Mach 416. Bloodline, Kryptonian bloodline. Superpowers, stellar energy, heat vision, bioelectric aura, super breath, super vision, super hearing, super intellect. Extracted entries. Steel body Superman, steel body Big Boss, extractable time 0. His strength had jumped by 850,000 tons. His speed climbed from Mach 206 to Mach 416. His defenses had doubled. He could now survive a 20 million ton equivalent nuclear blast to the face. On the surface, the list of powers looked the same, but every one of them had effectively doubled in potency. As expected of General Zod, the Lord of the Steel Body world, incredible. Xiao Ran glanced over at Zod, who was kneeling on the ground. For a moment, he regarded him with a grudging admiration, and then Zod snapped his head up and stared at him with pure hatred. I almost forgot about you, traitor. Zod spat, teeth clenched, and swung a punch. Boom! Dust exploded. Xiao Ran caught Zod's fist with one hand. Such weak punches. Have you been slacking off? He said with a grin. Then, under Zod's furious glare, he returned the favor, punching him in the face. Zod flew, crashing into the street and smashing headfirst into the ruins of a half-destroyed building. Xiao Ran lifted into the air, looking down at the rubble. A moment later, boom! A searing column of heat vision blasted out from the wreckage, striking Xiao Ran in midair. System, Chapter 46, Killing Zod. Achievement unlocked. Extraction count +2. Xiao Ran dodged, but Zod wasn't letting up. The heat vision tracked him like a hunter. I'll help! Clark shouted, racing forward. He knocked the Zod standing in the ruins aside and tangled with him. The two of them exchanged brutal blows as their fight streaked into the distance. Hey, don't steal my kill! Xiao Ran shouted and shot after them. Zod couldn't fly yet, clinging to Clark and hammering him with repeated punches. Clark bore it without a sound, taking blow after blow. The battle carried them from Metropolis, out over the bay, and into neighboring Gotham City, old neighbors, where the crowd had been watching the earlier Kryptonian incident like a spectacle. At first, people in Gotham had been eating popcorn and drinking cola, watching. Now the sight of two Kryptonians tearing through the city sent them into chaos. Run! They're fighting over here, someone screamed, and the streets emptied as people fled. One man on a rooftop jeered, Fight! Keep fighting! And a loose chunk of debris suddenly smashed into him, tearing through him mid-taunt. Cars jammed the streets, drivers abandoned their vehicles and ran. Clark grabbed Zod and used his body like a battering ram, smashing through reinforced concrete and flinging him onto a construction site. Zod slammed into a pile of thick steel beams with enough force to bend them. Clark landed and strode toward the rising Zod. Zod, give up, he shouted. Zod rose and roared, firing a thick heat vision at Clark that blew him back. Clark smashed through two buildings before finally stopping in midair, shaking his head and glaring at Zod on the construction site. Even wounded, Zod refused to yield. Before Clark could land another blow, Xiao Ran appeared behind Zod and kicked him like a soccer ball. Boom. Zod stormed through the air and slammed into a towering skyscraper. He howled in mid-flight and unleashed a subterranean roar of heat vision that sliced the skyscraper clean in two. Damn traitor! I want you all dead! Zod howled, his voice echoing across Gotham. In the sky, he was monstrous, crimson beams cutting through stone as if it were paper. Screams rose up from the city, joined into a single, terrified chorus. Xiao Ran vanished from his spot in a burst and reappeared in front of Zod. Zod, you're finished! He shouted, and blasted an even brighter, hotter heat vision from his eyes. The two beams met in midair. They clashed, locked, and then Xiao Ran's vision surged forward, overwhelming Zod's and driving straight into him. Chapter 38, Section 38. Ah! Zod threw his head back in a pained shriek as his Kryptonian battle armor split open, revealing the tight black suit beneath. From a short distance away, Clark's face registered pure surprise. How did Xiao Ran get so strong all of a sudden? Xiao Ran was already in front of Zod, having smashed through the air to reach him. With one hand, he crushed Zod's head. With the other, he snapped Zod's right arm. Zod's screams rang across Gotham City. Countless people heard them. Even the vilest criminals on the streets trembled, crouched, and unable to move. Crack! Another sound of bone breaking. Xiao Ran disabled Zod's hands, then forced the general's head up, making him look straight at him. Traitor! All of you are traitors to Krypton, Zod howled in agony. Xiao Ran showed no sympathy. A defeated dog's whining. Take your pain and your regret and go to hell. When Xiao Ran finished speaking, terrifying heat vision lashed into Zod's eyes. Ah! The pain was unbearable. Zod thrashed, but with his hands ruined, he couldn't free himself. After more than 10 seconds, pop! Zod's eyeballs were seared, then his brain melted, his screams cut off mid-cry. A notification chimed in Xiao Ran's mind. Ding! Congratulations, host, for completing the clearance achievement, Defeat General Zod. You have received the clearance achievement reward, Extraction Attempts, +2. When the system pinged, the heat vision in Xiao Ran's eyes finally subsided, and the crimson light faded. Even with his enhanced physiology, the corners of his eyes stung and burned. A dark cloud that had been blocking the sun split apart, and sunlight washed over him. The warm rays soothed the soreness until it vanished. Clark flew over to Xiao Ran and looked down at Zod's corpse, exhaling a heavy sigh. If he hadn't been so stubborn, he wouldn't have had to die. He was a born general, Xiao Ran said quietly, eyes on the floating countdown that had appeared. He would have given everything for Krypton. This was inevitable. The system had just told him he could remain in this world for another 24 hours. After that, he would be forced out. The one consolation, he could take one personal item with him. It could be money, a car, even a spaceship. But the only remaining Kryptonian ship in this world was the scout ship that had crashed in Metropolis, and it was already half destroyed. Xiao Ran had no storage device. Taking a spaceship back to the Zongman world would collapse his house. Gold and cars didn't interest him either, so he chose what he was wearing, the battle armor. The system treated the inner suit, the outer suit, and the armor as one complete set, like a three-piece outfit. It counted as a single item, and he could take it all. Here, Xiao Ran said, handing Zod's body to Clark. You should bury him. Clark accepted the corpse. It's up to you. You're leaving? Clark asked suddenly. Xiao Ran nodded. You saw right through me. The crisis is over. You said you wanted to go into space to find the rest of your people, but you can't leave right now. I can go for you. There's no need to rush, Clark replied, reluctant. It's fine. I've been planning to travel anyway. Space sounds good, Xiao Ran said with a smile. Clark could see his mind was made up. All right, just come back soon. If you get into trouble, remember you've got a friend on Earth. Clark hugged him. I will. And don't forget, there's a drink waiting at your wedding. Xiao Ran grinned. Clark went speechless. Xiao Ran laughed. See you. I'm off. With that, Xiao Ran looked up and blasted away. He accelerated to supersonic speed, leaving a spreading sonic boom behind him. In moments, he had shattered the atmosphere. Goodbye, my good brother, Clark called after him, then turned back to the ground with Zod's body. Louise ran up, glanced skyward, and then back at Clark. Why did he leave? He said he had to, Clark answered, a trace of sadness in his voice. Will he come back? Louise asked anxiously. He will, Clark said firmly. I believe he will come back. After breaking free of the atmosphere, Xiao Ran used the remaining 23-odd hours to push himself further, testing how much faster he could absorb stellar energy now that his Kryptonian bloodline had improved. He flew through the quiet of space and first landed on the moon. He gathered the bodies of the Kryptonian warriors he'd found and stacked them together, planning to deal with them later. Then he found a good spot, lay down, and let the sun pour over him. Whenever the angle was wrong, he shifted position to keep soaking in the rays. Time slipped by quickly. More than 23 hours passed like that. A few minutes before the forced return, Xiao Ran stood, brushed lunar dust from his clothes, and began burying the Kryptonian bodies one by one on the far side of the moon. He had originally thought to bury them on Mars, but there wasn't enough time. Even at his speed, it would take about 50 hours to reach Mars. He only had 24. The far side of the moon would have to do. This world was only in 2013. It would be years before anyone settled the lunar far side, and who knew when the Eagle Nation here would make it there, if ever. Burying them here wouldn't cause any immediate problems when he returned to the Batman vs. Superman world. All right. Xiao Ran brushed his hands of dust and glanced at the countdown in the corner of his vision. As it dropped to 0, whoosh! Chapter 39, Section 39. Xiao Ran opened his eyes and found himself back in his bedroom in the Zongman world. Throwing off the covers, he noticed he was still wearing his Krypton battle armor. He sat up, peeled the armor off, and left the black battlesuit underneath on. There was no need to remove it. It wasn't uncomfortable. On the contrary, it was breathable and pleasant. It was a product of Kryptonian technology. After so many years of advancement, their gear was naturally exceptional. He put his school uniform over the suit, washed up in the bathroom, and headed out. Chapter 48, The Cipher Map Incident, Taking the Maple Leaf Gold Coins. On his way to school, he bought a strawberry cream cake from a convenience store and ate it while walking. Xiao Ran, good morning, several classmates called out. Morning, he answered, exchanging greetings with familiar faces, many of them classmates from middle or even elementary school, though not all in his class now. At the school gate, he ran into Yotsuya Miko and Bai Hua. Good morning, Xiao Ran. Yotsuya Miko seemed cheerful. Xiao Ran-kun, good morning. Bai Hua, still munching on a rice ball, smiled. That was already her fourth rice ball of the morning. How are you today? Xiao Ran asked Miko. Feeling great, she replied, looking around brightly. Xiao Ran took that as a good sign. No clinging spirits today. He shuddered at the thought of being pegged as some spirit-attracting person. That would make him no better than Bai Hua. With his powerful body, he ought to radiate enough yang energy to burn off any malevolent spirits. So why didn't the spirits seem to fear him? Maybe it was because they were from different worlds, he mused as he walked to the second-year corridor. He parted ways with Miko and the others when they headed to Class C. He went to Class B. Today was Friday. Strange, he had remembered yesterday as Wednesday, but his phone confirmed the date. Well, that meant Conan would never see himself grow up. Morning, Sonoko, he greeted as he took his seat. Morning, Ran. Sonoko and Ran were chatting about entertainment gossip. Sonoko pulled him into the conversation, so he joined them. Yoko's so unlucky, Ran said sympathetically about Yoko Okino. Sonoko had said her cousin, who ran an entertainment company, had been by the house and spilled some industry news. Because someone had died at Yoko's house, her college boyfriend no less, Yoko was being blacklisted by her agency. That's the entertainment industry, Sonoko's cousin had told her. If an artist brings negative publicity or can't make money, the company will drop them. Xiao Ran had heard plenty about the industry in his previous life and nodded. It's a harsh business. Sonoko continued. Ran, remember you said Ikezawa Yuko used to visit Yoko Okino's house? My cousin said Ikezawa's been exposed too. People in the industry have noticed her tricks. She might be reported, and her work's already stopped. She's probably getting blacklisted as well. Ran had little sympathy for Ikezawa. She'd been at fault, and her mature sister image hadn't made a good impression on him. You do the wrong thing, you pay the price, Xiao Ran observed. They all agreed. Then Sonoko suddenly realized she'd forgotten to do her math homework. Her face collapsed when the teacher called on her. Xiao Ran and Ran couldn't help laughing as she trudged to the podium like someone headed for the gallows. That was what you got for gossiping. After school, Sonoko reminded him not to be late for their plan tomorrow. Don't worry, I'll be there early, he promised, waving goodbye before turning in the other direction. At the park, Conan and several kids were already gathered, talking. Xiao Ran smiled. He'd heard beforehand that Conan and the gang planned to meet here, since Taitan Elementary got out earlier than Taitan High. By the time Xiao Ran arrived, they'd gone home to drop their bags and then come back to decide what to play. Before they could choose, they'd found a map covered in ciphers and, true to their nature, decided to follow it. The kids started searching in the early evening and kept going until it was fully dark. Conan inspected the map, analyzed its clues, and concluded the map's author was Italian. That led them to a building whose facade resembled the kanji for sun. They peered through its windows, and Conan spotted the fish symbol marked on the map. Then the treasure should be up there, Conan said, looking at the ceiling. Genta shone a flashlight up, but saw nothing. Huh? There's nothing, he complained, scowling at Conan. Did you mess up your analysis? Conan ignored the jab and focused on a strange patch on the ceiling in the flashlight beam. Something must have been hanging there once. Maybe the treasure was taken already, he thought. If Genta had found the cipher map in the park earlier, perhaps someone had found the treasure and tossed the map away. On the other side of town, in a nearby alley, Xiao Ran stood over 3 unconscious thieves and glanced with a smile at a large sack beside them. Inside were 15,000 maple leaf gold coins, worth 600 million yen. Chapter 40, Section 40. He fished a thief's phone out from under the limp body, dialed the police emergency number, and spoke in a disguised voice. Yes, it's those 3 thieves from the TV. They're here now. Hurry, please. After the call, Xiao Ran tossed the phone back onto the thief, turned, picked up the bag of maple leaf gold coins, and left. As for the 3 thieves, he was sure they wouldn't wake for another 2 or 3 hours. The police wouldn't take that long to respond. By the time they came to, they'd find themselves in an interrogation room. Back home, Xiao Ran set the bag of gold coins on the table, opened the fridge, pulled out a can of Coke, and took a sip. 600 million yen worth of coins sounded huge, but in weight it was only a little over 113 kilograms. He could have brought back tens or hundreds of tons of gold from the Man of Steel world if he'd wanted. He'd chosen to bring his battle armor instead, so this 100-odd kilos was nothing extraordinary. Yoko Okino shuffled downstairs yawning. Seeing him, she gave a casual greeting. Hey, did you just wake up? I took a nap, Xiao Ran said flatly. I woke up early, okay? Yoko grabbed a can of Coke for herself and drank. Giving up on keeping in shape? No need, Xiao Ran said. My acting career's over anyway. Yoko tried to sound indifferent. Whether she truly felt that way, only she knew. After years of hard work, she'd finally made it, only to be pushed back to square one by Fuji Akiyoshi. It hurt. You giving up on yourself? Xiao Ran asked, sitting down beside her. What else can I do? She snapped. Then she admitted more softly. The agency called today. They said they won't be arranging any work for me anymore, and asked me to understand the company's difficulties. I understand their difficulties, she went on, voice rising, but who understands mine? Her anger spilled into another big gulp of Coke. She used to avoid fizzy drinks to keep the figure her fans loved, but now, what did it matter? Let myself go, she thought bitterly. You're not dying, Xiao Ran said, grabbing the can out of her hand. Give it here. Yoko tried to snatch it back, and he held her wrist down with one hand. Woo! She complained in mock outrage and then burst into tears. He couldn't stand to see her like that, so he let go, walked over, and set the bag of coins on the coffee table. Open it, he said. Through her tears, she looked at him, wounded and incredulous, and reached in. The bag spilled, a glittering pile of gold coins scattered across the floor. Yoko stared in disbelief. This is 600 million yen worth of maple leaf gold coins, Xiao Ran said calmly. Do you have a channel to convert them? You'll need cash fast. Yoko sucked in a breath and thought for a moment. I do have channels, but these maple leaves are too recognizable. Then melt them down, he replied. It solved the problem. That'll be fine, she said, nodding. Then she hugged his arm. Xiao Ran, what are you going to do with all this? Can you get your contract back from your old agency? He asked. She considered it. I think so. It might only cost a few million to get the contract back. I'm worthless to them now. Good. Get the contract back, then use the money to buy a small entertainment company. You can be the boss. Xiao Ran had no desire to run a company day to day. He didn't have the time, but someone who would manage it wholeheartedly for him would be perfect. He wasn't afraid Yoko would betray him. The visible leadership could be hers, while the real shares remained under his control. He could give her 10% and make her the legal face, letting him stay a behind-the-scenes owner who did nothing and still made money. You'll give me the company? Yoko's eyes widened. You're dreaming, he said with a grin. I'll give you up to 10% of the shares. 10% was nothing to scoff at. If the company cost 600 million yen, 10% was 60 million, far more than Yoko had in savings. She'd also be running the company and would need her fame to kick things off, so that 10% was fair pay for the work and risk. If the company grew, so would the value of her stake. Compared to working as a cash cow for those vampire executives at her previous agency, this offer was far better. You know how the industry works, Xiao Ran said, embracing her. You don't need me to tell you every detail. Decide what to do. I understand, Yoko said, her previous gloom replaced by a bright, hopeful expression. Xiao Ran liked seeing her this way. He lifted her up and headed upstairs. No dinner yet, she protested. Me neither. We can grab a late-night snack later, he said. Yoko agreed, though whether she'd have the appetite was another matter. Around 10 that night, Xiao Ran stood at the entrance of Sakamoto's izakaya and went in alone. Yoko couldn't make it, but he'd packed some food to take back to her. The bar was lively. Salarymen from nearby offices drinking and complaining about bosses and family life filled the room. The drunken Uncle Xiao Ran had met before wasn't there tonight. Good evening, Uncle Sakamoto, Xiao Ran said as he took a seat at the bar, the spot lone diners usually chose. The usual? Sakamoto smiled and offered him a glass of lemonade. I'll start with an unagi don, Xiao Ran said. Yours is better than most places. And 3 yakitori skewers, plus 2 okra skewers, please.